You have seen this kind of empath before. Everyone around them is moving in the same direction, chasing the same trend, repeating the same mindset, copying the same way of acting. And this empath is not doing that. They are not trying to be different. They are not trying to make a statement. They are simply not interested in following something that does not feel real to them. They watch, they understand, but they do not join in just because everyone else is doing it. And if that sounds like you, then you have probably heard the same questions again and again. Why are you so different? Why can't you just go with it? Why do you think so much about everything? But what most people fail to see is that this is not disconnection. This is what happens when an empath becomes aware. And once that awareness grows, their whole way of moving through life begins to change. So stay with me because this goes deeper than most people think. What looks like distance is often emotional intelligence. What looks like silence is often deep processing. What looks like pulling away is often a strong connection to truth. People misunderstand this all the time because they only judge what they can see on the surface. But mature empaths do not live on the surface. They are reading what is under the moment, what is beneath the mood, what is hidden behind the behavior. And once a person starts living at that level, following the crowd stops feeling natural. It starts feeling heavy. It starts feeling false. And that is where everything begins to shift. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that when empaths do not follow trends, it means they think they are better than others. Some people say they are trying too hard to be different. Others think they want attention in a quiet and indirect way. But that is usually not true at all. Most empaths are not avoiding trends so they can build an identity around being unique. In fact, many of them are not trying to be noticed in any way. Their behavior comes from something much deeper than image. They step away from trends because those trends do not feel emotionally true to them. Most people follow trends for one simple reason. They want to belong. They want connection. They want to feel included in something larger than themselves. There is comfort in doing what others are doing, even if it only lasts for a moment. But empaths do not only look at the outside of a trend. They feel the pressure underneath it. They sense the emotional push behind it. They notice the quiet anxiety that says, keep up or fall behind. They feel the fear of being left out, even when no one says it directly. And once they feel that pressure, it becomes hard for them to join in honestly. Because if something does not feel real inside them, they cannot fake it outside. That creates an inner resistance they cannot ignore. Here is the part many people miss. This is not rejection of other people. This is rejection of false alignment. For an empath, pretending often feels heavier than standing alone. And that is why they choose what feels true, even if it places them just outside the crowd. That choice is not pride. It is emotional honesty. What truly separates a mature empath is not just sensitivity, and it is definitely not weakness. It is awareness. That is the difference. Empaths do not simply feel emotions as they happen and move on. They notice what they are feeling, why they are feeling it, and where it may be coming from. They live the moment, but at the same time they are quietly studying it. Before they accept an idea, follow a trend, or put their emotions into something, there is usually a calm process happening inside them. It is not loud. It is not dramatic, but it is always there. They ask themselves things like, does this really fit who I am? Do I truly believe this, or am I just soaking it in from the people around me? Did I choose this freely, or am I being emotionally pulled toward it? Sometimes those questions are not spoken in words, but the filter is still active. And because of that filter, empaths move more slowly in emotional and social situations. While other people react fast, agree fast, and adapt fast, empaths pause. Not because they are lost, but because they are going deeper. That pause matters more than people realize. It is where clarity begins to form. Empaths often sit with a thought or feeling longer than most people do. They do not rush to a conclusion just to stay included or feel approved. They let the emotion breathe. They let the pattern show itself. They wait until the picture becomes clear. And this small habit creates something powerful over time. It creates independence. While others react to life the second it happens, empaths step back and observe it from a slightly wider view. And once that habit becomes natural, they stop moving like everyone else. Most people follow social behavior, opinions, and trends because they want acceptance. That desire is human. People want to be liked. They want to be welcomed. They want to feel that they belong somewhere. So they lean toward whatever is popular, whatever is approved, and whatever is being celebrated in the moment because it gives them emotional safety. But mature empaths slowly grow beyond that pattern, not because they stop caring about people, not because they suddenly hate connection, and not because they reject social life. The shift happens for a deeper reason. They begin to see how unstable outside approval really is. They notice that what is praised today can be criticized tomorrow. What is accepted in one group may be rejected in another. The exact same behavior can get opposite reactions depending on timing, people, and mood. Once they see that, external approval starts to feel like weak ground for identity. So instead of chasing it, they begin building something steadier inside themselves. This is where self-trust starts to grow. And as it grows, their inner questions become stronger. Do I actually like this, or am I reacting to pressure? Does this reflect the real me or the version of me that wants to be accepted? Am I choosing this, or am I just afraid not to? Those questions slowly reshape the way they decide everything. At first, it feels like a slight hesitation, a pause, a second thought. But over time, it becomes a quiet system running all the time in the background. And once that inner system becomes strong enough, something important happens. The need to follow begins to disappear. Because now the empath is not using other people's reactions to define their worth. They stop adjusting themselves every time public opinion shifts. And that is when identity stops being borrowed and starts becoming real. Here is something many people never fully notice about empaths. Following the crowd is fast. It happens almost in one motion. People see something, feel a reaction, and move with it. No pause, no depth, just response. But processing works in a completely different way. It is slow on purpose. Empaths do not only notice what is popular, they look beneath it almost right away. They do not stop at the trend itself. They start wondering why it is rising now. What emotional need is it feeding? What behavior is it encouraging? What gap inside people is it filling? And while others focus on the moment, empaths begin to track the pattern. They see how people shift. They notice how fast feelings spread. They catch the little changes in expression, energy, tone, and need that most people never even register. What looks like harmless entertainment or normal social movement to others can look like a full emotional system to an empath. And once someone starts seeing life like that, something changes forever. Blindly following becomes almost impossible. Because once you understand the structure underneath something, you cannot go back to only seeing the surface. What seems fresh and exciting to everyone else can start feeling repetitive. The same emotional hooks, the same race for attention, the same search for validation dressed up in new clothes. And this is where the empath naturally steps back. Not because they hate society, not because they are above it, and not because they do not care. If anything, they are often paying more attention than anyone else. But they are seeing more clearly. And when clarity deepens, participation becomes a conscious choice instead of an automatic reaction. Keep watching mentally, because this next shift explains why they seem calm even in very loud spaces. Mature empaths develop something rare, and it is often misunderstood from the outside. They develop emotional independence. This does not mean they become cold. It does not mean they stop feeling. And it does not mean they shut the world out. It means they stop letting the environment decide what they should feel. They begin trusting their own inner response more than the emotional pressure around them. So even when they are surrounded by strong opinions, social intensity, or group emotion, they do not absorb it right away. They pause inside. They ask, what do I actually feel here? Not what should I feel? Not what is expected. What is mine? And that creates a very stable kind of strength. It means an empath can stand in a room full of pressure and still stay connected to themselves. They can understand people deeply without losing their own center. They can notice emotion, pain, excitement, and influence without taking all of it into their own body as truth. They can feel with others without becoming others. That ability is powerful, but it does not appear overnight. It grows through experience, through being misunderstood, through being called too sensitive when their depth was actually perception, through feeling out of place in spaces that looked normal but felt emotionally off, through moments where they had to choose between fitting in and being honest with themselves. Every one of those moments builds inner awareness. Every one of those choices builds self-trust. And over time, that repetition changes identity itself. The empath begins asking less, what do others want me to feel? And more, what is true for me right now? That is where emotional independence becomes real. Not as an idea, not as a quote, as a lived reality. And once that happens, following the crowd starts to feel unnatural, not because the crowd is wrong, but because the self is finally strong. And this is where the misunderstanding usually begins. When empaths do not move fast, do not copy the trend, and do not react the instant everyone else reacts, they naturally stand out. Not because they want to, just because their rhythm is different. Most people do not know how to read that kind of behavior, so they label it instead. They say the empath is too quiet, too hard to read, too distant, too deep, too different. But what they are actually seeing is not confusion. It is control. Empaths do not run on impulse the same way many people do in social settings. They do not instantly take on the mood of a room or agree with whatever is popular just because it is moving around them. There is always a small space before they respond, a pause, a check, a silent evaluation that other people usually never notice. They do not follow blindly. They do not mirror behavior just to stay included. They observe first, then they process, then they choose. That creates a very different rhythm from the average person. While others move automatically, reacting to every social signal as it appears, empaths slow the whole thing down on the inside. Even when they are physically present, part of them has already stepped back mentally to observe. And to people who are used to quick reactions, that can feel strange. Silence can look like distance. Thoughtfulness can look like disinterest. Careful choices can be misread as overthinking. But that reading is wrong. Empaths are not reacting less because they care less. They are reacting less because they are processing more. They are not disconnected from what is happening. They are simply not being controlled by it. That difference is hard for impulsive people to understand, but very easy for perceptive people to feel. And once you notice it, the empath stops looking distant and starts looking grounded. There is also a hidden strength here that many people do not notice right away. When empaths stop copying trends, stop reshaping themselves for approval, and stop changing identity to match whatever is popular in the moment, they become consistent. They stay rooted in who they are. That matters more than it seems. In a world built around imitation, repetition, and fast social copying, consistency becomes rare. People may not understand empaths at first. They may seem quiet, slightly separate, not fully invested in what everyone else is doing. But even when people cannot explain it, they still feel something different about them. Why? Because it feels real. There is no forced image, no performance, no personality built only for applause. What an empath shows on the outside is usually much closer to what they actually feel on the inside, and that has weight. In spaces where most people are constantly adapting, changing opinions, changing style, changing tone just to stay accepted, the empath remains steady. They see the noise. They understand the pressure, but they do not become it automatically. Over time, that steadiness becomes one of their greatest strengths. Trends fade. Group opinions flip. Social energy changes fast, but authenticity stays. And people are naturally drawn to what feels real, even when they do not say it out loud. So even if empaths are not seeking attention, they often carry a strong presence. Not because they are louder than everyone else, but because they are more aligned with themselves. And in the long run, that quiet alignment outlasts popularity every single time. Being real in a world full of imitation is not just uncommon. It is powerful. And that power does not need to announce itself to be felt. If you are the kind of empath who does not follow every trend, does not copy what the crowd is doing, and does not feel the need to constantly sync with group behavior, then there is something important you need to hear. You are not broken. You are not missing some social skill that other people have, and you are not disconnected from life. What has really happened is much more meaningful. You have reached a point where outside direction is no longer needed to tell you who you are. You are no longer building identity from what is popular, accepted, or praised in a certain moment. Your inner process has changed. Now you observe what is happening. You study the pattern behind it. You notice the emotional force beneath it, but you do not instantly become part of it. You choose with intention. And that is the line between reaction and awareness. This is not confusion. It is clarity. It is not isolation. It is discernment. It is not resistance to people. It is alignment with self. That kind of awareness is rare because most people are still moving through life in reaction mode. They react quickly. They adjust constantly. They shape themselves around outside feedback without even realizing it. But you are not doing that anymore. You are letting experience move through inner understanding before it becomes action. And because of that, your way of being can look unusual from the outside. Your quiet is not emptiness. It is processing. Your distance is not lack of care. It is observation. Your stillness is not absence. It is awareness. And this is the part most people never understand unless they have lived it. The deeper your awareness becomes, the less pressure you feel to explain why you are different. You simply start trusting it. Still, there is another layer to this. Mature empaths are not rejecting trends just because trends are popular. They are not against fun. They are not against culture. They are not trying to live outside the world. What they reject is emotional dishonesty. If a trend is harmless and genuine, they may enjoy it like anyone else. But if it feels forced, hollow, or built on pressure, something inside them pulls back. That inner signal is subtle, but it is strong. It says this is not yours. This is not real for you. And because empaths are highly tuned to emotional texture, they notice the difference between natural excitement and social performance. They can feel when people are enjoying something because it truly brings them joy, and they can also feel when people are performing enjoyment because they do not want to be left behind. That difference matters. It matters more than most people know, because empaths are not just reacting to the event itself. They are reacting to the emotional energy wrapped around it. If the whole thing feels driven by fear, pressure, image, or quiet insecurity, they lose interest fast. And this is exactly why mature empaths are often misunderstood by people who only see behavior and not motive. On the outside, it looks like non-participation. On the inside, it is discernment. It is the refusal to merge with something that feels emotionally false. And once an empath learns to trust that signal, life gets simpler in a strange way. They stop forcing themselves into spaces that feel wrong. They stop saying yes when the deeper answer is no. They stop wearing identities that do not fit. And that saves a huge amount of emotional energy. So, if this is hitting home, pay attention, because the final pieces of this are where the quiet power of the empath really becomes clear. The truth is, many empaths spend years doubting themselves before they understand what is really happening. In the beginning, they may wonder why they cannot just relax into the same social flow as everyone else, why certain environments drain them so fast, why fake excitement feels exhausting, why group pressure feels so loud, even when nobody is saying much. They may even try to force themselves to participate in the usual way. Smile at the right moment, agree at the right moment, join in when everyone else joins in, but inside something always feels off. Something feels borrowed, something feels heavy. And over time, that discomfort teaches them an important lesson. The cost of pretending is too high, not because they are fragile, but because they are aware. When you can feel the gap between what is real and what is performed, staying inside performance starts to feel deeply tiring. That is why many mature empaths value solitude more than superficial connection. Not because they hate people, but because being alone often feels lighter than being emotionally false in a crowd. And once they stop seeing that as a flaw, a kind of freedom begins. They no longer chase every invitation. They no longer panic when they do not fit into every group. They no longer believe they have to mirror what is around them just to be accepted. That does not make them antisocial. It makes them selective. It means they care more about truth than access, more about depth than appearance, more about alignment than popularity. And that shift changes everything. Because when a person stops chasing belonging at any cost, they finally become available for real belonging. The kind that does not require acting. The kind that does not demand constant adjustment. The kind that lets them stay whole. That is not loss. That is growth. Quiet growth, yes, but powerful. And once that growth settles in, comparison starts to lose its grip. This is one of the biggest turning points for a mature empath. They stop asking why they are not like everyone else. They stop measuring their path against louder people, faster people, more socially accepted people. They stop seeing their own pace as a problem. Why? Because they begin to realize that different does not mean wrong. Slower does not mean weaker. Quieter does not mean less alive. In fact, many of the strongest shifts in an empath's life happen in silence, far away from the performance of public approval. Their growth often looks invisible to other people. But inside, entire worlds are changing. They are learning to trust their own reading of situations. They are learning to stay present without absorbing everything around them. They are learning to say no without guilt, yes without fear, and maybe without pressure. They are learning that being true to themselves may confuse some people, but betraying themselves confuses them even more. And this is where peace begins to replace self-doubt. Not perfect peace. Not every day, but a steadier kind, a grounded kind. The kind that comes when you no longer need outside noise to tell you who you are. So when the crowd moves fast, the empath does not always move with it. When the room gets loud, they do not always raise their voice. When opinions spread like wildfire, they do not always join the heat. Sometimes they just watch. Sometimes they just feel. Sometimes they wait. And that waiting is not weakness. It is wisdom forming. It is awareness refusing to rush. It is the self choosing not to disappear inside collective energy. And that, more than anything, is why mature empaths often look calm in places that would pull other people apart. So if people have ever called you too different, too quiet, too deep, too slow to react, or too hard to read, maybe it is time to see those labels in a new way. Maybe what they are calling distance is your ability to pause. Maybe what they are calling overthinking is your habit of checking truth before joining pressure. Maybe what they are calling detachment is your refusal to hand your inner world over to every passing wave. Because that is what mature awareness does. It does not make you empty. It makes you selective. It does not make you cold. It makes you clear. It does not remove your emotions. It teaches you how to hold them without letting every outside force rearrange them. And yes, that can make you stand out. But standing out is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it is proof that something inside you has become stable. Stable enough not to bend every time the world shifts. Stable enough not to copy what does not fit. Stable enough to remain honest in places built on performance. That kind of stability is rare. And rare things are often misunderstood before they are respected. So do not rush to correct your nature just because others cannot read it quickly. Some people are only comfortable with what is familiar, fast, and easy to label. But you were not built for shallow speed. You were built for deeper seeing, for intentional movement, for emotional truth. And once you accept that fully, something changes for good. You stop fighting your own rhythm. You stop apologizing for your own depth. You stop forcing yourself into patterns that were never made for you. And in that moment, your path stops looking like a problem and starts looking like clarity. Real clarity. The kind that does not need permission.